All right, so I actually got another story here for you guys in the same day, back to back, specifically relating to ballot measures or more direct democracy here in the United States. Obviously, just talked about the one in Ohio where Republicans were trying to dismantle or attack the democratic process, and now we have Democrats following in the same vein. So, here from the Washington Post, they say DC Democrats sue to block ranked choice voting ballot measure. Okay, so this is not even necessarily just blocking ranked choice voting from being implemented within the District of Columbia. It's also blocking the ability for people to vote on whether or not they even want to have ranked choice voting, right? Great democracy defending party that we have here with the Democrats. So what are they talking about here? They say just weeks after the DC Board of Elections determined that a proposed ballot initiative to bring ranked choice voting and open primaries to the city's elections was legally sufficient to move forward, the DC Democratic Party has filed a lawsuit that would keep it off the ballot, arguing that the measure violates the U.S. Constitution and the Home Rule Charter. So we're going to get to their arguments about why they're saying that they're pushing back against this. Most of them, if not, I think pretty much all of them that they outline in this article are entirely bullshit and bad faith arguments. One of them blew my mind when I read it because it seems like they are legitimately trying to argue that minority voters within D.C. are frankly like too stupid to be able to understand how ranked choice voting works. These are their arguments that they're making against this, so we'll get to all of that here in a second, but I just want to make it clear exactly what ranked choice voting and open primaries actually are and why they would be beneficial to an actual democratic process. So the first one, open primaries, that's basically just saying anybody would be allowed to vote in some of these primary elections, right? You could have somebody who is an independent or an unaffiliated voter, and they don't have to be registered with the Democratic Party in order to vote in Democratic primaries, right? So that's what having an open primary would mean. Now, the ranked choice voting aspect of this is massively beneficial to increasing a actual democracy or a democratic outcome that is closer to the will of the people than having this first past the post system, because what ranked choice voting allows you to do is basically rank your candidates in the order that you would like to see them elected, and there's this counting process that happens where, you know, if your candidate was on the bottom of the rung and nobody within the field got 50% or met that 50% threshold, then your candidate gets removed from that count. They do a recount, and then your second choice would then go, your vote would then go to your second choice, right? So, I mean, it's basically allowing you to get the closest to your preferred candidate as possible, and then once somebody inevitably hits that 50%, they become the, elected candidate, right? So it's a great policy. It was something that was put forward, primarily brought into like more so the American conscious by Andrew Yang in the 2020 Democratic primary. That was one of the big things that he was focusing on. Of course, now with his new party that he has set up, the Forward Party, is completely useless and vapid and doesn't stand for anything, including, it seems like, ranked choice voting. I barely ever see him talk about that anymore. But anyways, they continue here giving a little bit more context. Okay, so they say the lawsuit by the Democrats was filed August 1st in the DC Superior Court and first reported by DCist, and it says that the city's election board erred last month when it determined that the proposed initiative was proper subject matter and asked the court to prematurely or permanently block it from being implemented. While the measure's organizers still have a long way to go before the Make All Votes Count Act, also known as Initiative 83, reaches next year's ballot, it has already drawn a chorus of opposition, including from the city's Republican Party. So Republicans, Democrats teaming up here to be firmly against democracy. They say, as proposed, Initiative 83, starting in 2026, would allow more than 80,000 people registered as unaffiliated to vote in DC's primary election, which is currently closed to them. It also would implement a ranked choice balloting system in the city, and of course, as I just pointed out there, under the ranked choice system, voters would be able to rank the candidates for an office in order of preference, and if no candidate emerges with at least 50% of the vote during the ballot tabulation, the lowest performing candidate is eliminated. Then they redo the count. You know, if your candidate gets eliminated, your second choice then gets bumped up, your vote applies to them, and so on and so forth until one of the candidates hits 50%. They say supporters of the measure, who argued Tuesday that the Democratic Party's lawsuit was filed prematurely and should be dismissed, say that these two changes would make elections more accessible in the district. Opening up primaries would give unaffiliated residents in deep blue DC a voice in the city's crucial primary elections. As for ranked choice voting, proponents say that it would ensure that elected candidates receive at least 50% of the vote, which isn't always the case now, and that seems like an entirely reasonable demand. Of course, you want want, the person who, is able to achieve at least a majority support to be the person who ends up getting elected. But now we have a system where it's first past the post, where somebody could win an election like 40% to 39%, and then that person ends up taking everything, right? So, I mean, it's a terrible system. And obviously, again, we're talking about, as I point out here, a deep blue place, right? DC is not some like battleground state. This is as deep blue, as Democratic supporting as you could possibly ask for. So this is really Democrats trying to protect their establishment. This is Democrats trying to protect their incumbents from some of these actual challenges, right? This isn't about like, oh, you're going to let the Republicans win if we do this ranked choice voting system. No, it has nothing to do with that at all. And of course, the other, added benefit to having a ranked choice system is that it completely eliminates even the concept of having some sort of a spoiler candidate, right? That was one of the big arguments they made back when Trump beat Hillary Clinton, is like, oh, Jill Stein voters, if they had only voted for Hillary, then she would have won. First off, I mean, I've outlined many times before why I think those arguments are bullshit in and of themselves, even under the current way that we run our elections. But if you had ranked choice voting, then that never would have even been a problem, right? Because theoretically, somebody who voted for Jill Stein, they could have put her as number one when, she was the lowest candidate on the list. Then they could have put Hillary Clinton as number two, and then those votes would have gone to Hillary, right? So, I mean, this is something that does expand the ability for people to participate in democracy. It makes it so that you are much more likely to get a candidate who actually wins the election, who is supported by the widest swath of the public as you could possibly ask for. And so, of course, Democrats don't want it. But they say in its lawsuit, however, the Democratic Party says that opening the city's primaries violates the city's home rule charter, which instructs voters to elect the mayor, attorney general, and members of the DC Council on a partisan basis. The Democratic Party also claims in its suit that opening the city's primaries would violate voters' rights to freely associate with a political party protected by the First and Fifth Amendments. They're saying it is a violation of the First Amendment, okay? A violation of the First Amendment that is supposed to protect free speech in this country to have open primaries? What are we talking about here? What? Because some, couple 10,000 people who are unaffiliated, right? Not even saying that they're like Republicans or anything, right? These are just unaffiliated voters who don't want to necessarily 100% be associated with the Democratic Party and to sign up for their roles, right? You're just saying that they would be allowed to participate in these elections. And that's somehow, anti-First Amendment, anti-Fifth Amendment, and violating people's rights to freely associate with a political party. What does it have to do with your right to associate with the Democrats? Nobody's saying this is going to remove your ability to associate with the Democratic Party in any way, shape, or form, right? So, I mean, it's just incredibly weak, weaselly arguments that the Democrats are putting forward in this instance. But they continue. They say the lawsuit repeats other claims against the ballot initiative that were dismissed by the DC Elections Board when it allowed the measure to proceed, including an argument that it would cost money to implement, right? They say ballot initiatives by law cannot have a fiscal impact. First of all, that seems like an incredibly stupid rule. Number one, because basically every ballot initiative that you could possibly put on the table logistically would necessarily have some sort of associated cost with it, right? I mean, we're talking about, ballot measures that need to be actually implemented. It takes resources to change the law. It takes resources to amend the Constitution, like in Ohio, right? It takes resources, it takes manpower to actually put these things into practice. I don't think off the top of my head even conceptualize of some sort of a ballot measure that wouldn't cost some sort of resources in order to actually implement. But that's the argument they're going forward with here. They say the Democratic Party further alleges that the measure runs afoul of the DC Human Rights Act, by discriminating against residents in low-income areas of the city who might be confused by the new system. They say the initiative's backers have said that claim is insulting to black voters. They say Charles Wilson, the chair of the DC Democratic Party, has pointed to data showing that residents in Ward 7 and 8 were already more likely to just pick one candidate in races where they are allowed to vote for two candidates, such as the at-large seats on the council, saying, quote, defendants' discrimination, intentional or not, has caused and will cause ongoing harm to plaintiffs and other residents, especially those in wards east of the Anacostia River, the lawsuit reads. I mean, think about what they're saying here. They are saying that these, relatively disproportionately minority voters or relatively disproportionately poorer voters within these places in DC, they are too stupid. They are going to be too confused by this system. I mean, first of all, if it is a confusing system, which granted, it would be a radical change from the way that we currently operate elections, I don't think it's too difficult difficult of a concept to understand. Okay, you list out the candidates that you support in the order that you support them. I don't think that's too complicated of a concept. It seems like if you wanted to actually do this, you could implement the policy, explain it to people, and educate people on how this process is actually going to work out. But they're just kind of like throwing their hands up in the air, and not only throwing their hands up in the air and giving up on this kind of a thing, but arguing that it violates the DC Human Rights Act, okay, by discriminating against residents in low-income areas. All right, these are the kinds of arguments that the Democratic Party is putting forward here. I mean, weaponizing these kinds of like almost identity politics in a way that is completely disgusting. I mean, it's completely absurd, right? But again, these are the lengths that they are willing to go in order to protect a lot of their incumbents and a lot of the members of the establishment, especially within a place like DC, right? I mean, this is, as Trump calls it, the swamp, and he's not wrong to call it the swamp, right? But they finish off here just to give us a glimpse into the near future and where this is potentially going. They say, Rice and the measure's supporters must still gather enough signatures for ballot consideration and may end up facing additional legal challenges beyond the Democratic Party's lawsuit. Organizers have said that they plan to launch an educational campaign for voters to better understand the proposed electoral changes, and a first court date has been scheduled for November 3rd. So it's going to be a couple of months until it seems like we're going to get a legitimate update on this. I mean, I guess the judge who is going to be making a determination on this could, I guess, make a determination sooner than that if they think that the Democratic Party's arguments in this case or in this lawsuit that they brought are strong or that they're sound arguments. But I mean, we just went through all of them. They seem like they're entirely bullshit, right? Oh, it's going to cost us too much money to implement this. Oh, the voters are going to be too confused by this. We can't do it. Oh, it's going to violate somehow people's First and Fifth Amendment rights because you're going to have 80,000 unaffiliated voters potentially participating in these primaries. I mean, just like incredibly weak, incredibly weaselly arguments. And again, this is coming from the party that is currently basing a lot of its electoral strategy on trying to convince the American people that it's only the Republicans that are a threat to democracy and that they are the great vanguard defenders of democracy, the only thing standing in between, where we're at right now and fascism. So, I mean, it's not easy to, make that kind of a case when these are the kinds of actions that you're actually taking behind the scenes to try to crush efforts to legitimately expand democracy.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying